What is the creepiest and most unexplainable paranormal experience you've ever had? Mine is secondhand. My stepmom and my dad used to work opposite shifts there for a while. He was on nights, her on days. They had a set of baby monitors from when my sister and I were babies. My dad said they could record short messages with them, and they would leave them out on the coffee table for the other to hear when they got home from their shift. This went on for a bit, then once their shifts lined up they put the monitors away in storage. She died of cancer at a really young age, and my dad had just gotten back from the funeral and was home alone. He spent that night going through their things, packing some of her stuff away. He said he had one of the baby monitors sitting out on the coffee table and it woke him up in the middle of the night with an old message going off on repeat that she had recorded. It said "I love you Mike, I love you Mike," over and over. My dad told me he just sat on the couch in the dark and listened to her message until the batteries died. A couple of weeks later he had picked us kids up for the weekend. After my sister and I went inside he said he was sitting on the porch smoking, and a strong gust of wind blew and he said he could smell her perfume that she always wore. It scared me hearing those stories as a kid, but now I can see the beauty and peace in those experiences. When I was in elementary school, I shared a queen-size bed with my older sister, and our family dog, a mutt that looked like a short-haired lassie, would sleep at the foot of our bed every night. When I was about 6 years old, I woke up one night around midnight and saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. The figure was entirely in black without any eyes or a face. I tried to wake my sister up, but she rolled over to go back to sleep. My sister must have accidentally kicked the dog, because the dog woke up and raised her head and started growling at the figure at the foot of the bed. The growling then woke my sister up and she saw the figure and started screaming. When my parents came into the room and turned the light on, nothing was there. To this day, both my sister and I are adamant that we saw a ghost or other demon in our room. We know we aren't crazy because the dog saw it too. Not me, but a friend of mine told me about a dream she had years ago about a decrepit old man who was being chased by wolves. In the dream, he kept referring to himself in the third person as Old Skin. Old Skin's gotta get away from the wolves. Eventually, the wolves caught up to him and started ripping him to pieces in front of her, and he kept narrating the events in a monotone voice. Old Skin's being eaten alive, Old Skin's gonna die. She woke up feeling creeped out, but the weirdest part came when she started describing the dream to her brother. He stopped her mid-sentence and asked, "Was his name Old Skin?" I had the exact same dream. I don't know if that counts as paranormal, but it's fucking creepy. Have posted this before, but when I was a kid, my brother and I would get stuck with babysitting the neighbor's kid. His name was Alex. Alex was really fond of my Lego set that I had in the corner of my room facing the window. He would play for hours, staying preoccupied, while my brother and I would play video games in the living room. So one night, when I fell asleep on the couch, while babysitting, my brother came to me and said, "Alex is under your bed and shaking." I asked, "What's wrong with him?" My brother told me to follow him into the room and try to talk him back out from under the bed. I go inside to find him on the verge of tears as he was trembling profusely under my bed. I asked Alex, "What's wrong? Why are you under there?" Alex whimpered, "It," while looking at my sliding closet. As I walked toward the bed in order to help him out, he ran all the way back over to his house and waited on his front steps until his parents got home. Now, my parents were out to dinner with his, and he explained the whole story in detail to both his parents and mine. His explanation sent shivers down my spine when my brother and I left the house to meet up with his parents and find out what happened. My mom told me that Alex was playing with my Legos and heard a slight murmur from my closet, something that resembled a faint vocalization of, "Come here." He said that he looked behind him and noticed the closet had a slight opening with light peering in from my lamp. He stared at the crack until he saw an eyelid open. He told us that there was a man in my closet. Alex then hid under my bed after he gave out a slight yelp, which attracted my brother's attention. My family rushes back into my house and into my room. In horror, we find my closet door rocked open. My window had been left open, when it was previously closed, and a few things knocked over which had not been touched previously. We still don't know what force we were reckoning after that evening. Thank God nothing more severe happened. When I was about 16 years old I encountered something that still bugs me to this day. I woke up around 6 a.m. on a normal weekday and went downstairs to get ready to school. No one else in my family had woken up at this point. I got in the shower, still sleepy and could barely hold my eyes open. After a few minutes of showering someone tried to get it and I told whoever it was that I was in the shower. The person then proceeded to aggressively open the door. I saw the door handle going up and down like crazy and he or she / whatever knocked on the door harder and harder. And then it suddenly stopped. Didn't think that much about it, but when I got out of the shower I realized that nobody was up yet. I proceeded with eating breakfast. And after a while my dad came down the stairs, so I asked him if it was he who had wanted to use the bathroom earlier. He said no, and that both my mom and younger brother was still asleep, so it could have not been them either. And even if it had been any family member, they would not have tried to open the door so aggressively at 6 in the morning. First post, don't hate me. /scared Swede. I saw my deceased ex-husband in my kitchen. I was watching TV in my living room, in the middle of the day, and kept hearing this sound, like someone was jiggling their change around. And it was loud, as if it were in the room with me. I paused my TV yet the sound persisted. So I start to look around the room and when I got to the kitchen, I saw him standing there. He was looking around, as if taking stock of my apartment. Oh, and he was jiggling change in one hand, while flipping a quarter in between his fingers with the other hand. Something he did a lot when he was alive. He turned his head and saw me frozen, staring at him. The expression on his face was new I would never forget. His eyes got huge and he kind of tilted his head forward, with the expression like, "You can see me?" I don't know how long we stared at each for, but I turned away when I started to hear my cat ripping up the ducking carpet again in the other room. When I turned back to my ex, he was gone. It's worth noting that he had only been dead for a couple months too. Some Romanian women I worked with told me that the dead stick around for 3 months before crossing over. I don't know about all that, but I know without a shadow of a doubt, what I saw that day. Late to the party. But here is mine. I used to be in the military and the training camp bunk that we lived in was said to be haunted. Occasionally, our stuff would go missing and reappear in weird places, like under our bed, or inside a bag that we had zipped up and stuff. No big deal, right? I mean, human error and all. Then came the instance that freaked everyone out. It was one night after lights out and my friend was on his phone texting his girlfriend. Most of us were drifting off to sleep, and were lying on our beds etc. Suddenly, he heard the shuffling of feet from the corridor, so thinking that it was our sergeant, he quickly hid his phone under his pillow, rolled over on his side and pretended to sleep. Till this day, what happens next chills me to the bone. While he pretended to sleep, he heard someone right behind him, at the other side of his bed going, "Don't worry, you can continue to pretend sleep." I would dismiss this as a figment of his imagination, except about 5 other people around him heard it as well, including me. Creepier still, there was no one there, and it was the voice of a little girl that said it. For reference, our training camp was in the middle of an island, and was set up away from the main admin blocks. The island has been closed by the government for army training purposes for the past 15 years, so there were definitely no civilians around, let alone kids. To make matters freakier, when we came back from our weekend home leave, there was a bunch of female hair on his bed, neatly bundled up, long and jet black. Under his pillow was a note, "Remember me?" Now, as I said, we were in the middle of a forest, in the middle of an island. And at that point in time, there were no female recruits, personnel on the island. Our bunks were locked up for the weekend and the duty sergeant had no idea that the incident happened. We never spoke about it after that night. Still chills me to the bone thinking about it. Edit. Yes guys, I am from Singapore. And as those of you guys who are from there would know, until recently, army camps in Singapore did not allow hand phones with cameras. So no pictures. Also, for those of you that say it may be a prank. Yes, it very well may have been. But if it were, it'd be one heck of a prank and I was really full bad. The complexity of that prank would have been crazy and I applaud anyone that was able to pull that off. That being said, many Singaporean guys will tell you that the camp, Tekong, is a place where a lot of paranormal stuff happens. Most guys that have been through that camp have either experienced something firsthand, or know someone that has experienced it firsthand. Lastly, for those of you saying I fabricated the whole thing, my job is not to convince you, I'm simply relating what the heck happened to me and my army buddies. Believe what you will, but I know what happened to me. I was a rookie cop when my brother committed suicide. He was one of my older siblings but we were very close. He died in another state, and I had a lot of guilt then about not recognizing the signs. His remains were in bad shape by the time he was discovered, so it was a closed coffin service. About a week after he died, I was back at work one night, and my partner and I see a pimp pistol whipping one of his girls. I jump out and the pimp sees me and the foot chase was on. I was running after him, gun in hand, and he cuts through a narrow corridor under a building that leads to a courtyard in the middle. Right before I reach the courtyard, I hear "it's okay" in my dead brother's voice. I hit the courtyard and the guy is against the side pointing a gun at my head, and squeezes the trigger twice. I froze for a millisecond and then started beating him in the head with my revolver. Till this day, I don't know why I didn't just shoot him. Cuff him and walk him back to the street and find my partner. I tell my partner about him squeezing the trigger, but not the voice I heard. We unload the gun, .32 revolver, right there, and 2 bullets have strike marks on them. Take the gun to the lab for testing. Tell the tech the story. He puts the 2 bullets with strike marks back in and shoots into the test tank. Both bullets fired. Okay, not me, but my family. My grandfather was a bad man. Alcoholic, extremely violent, tried to kill my grandmother in front of their kids. One of his less horrible acts was abandoning my grandmother with their 6 kids, all under the age of 12. Some of his kids maintained minimal contact with him. He lived about 30 or 40 miles from my grandmother and the 2 kids who'd stayed in the area. When he was in his 80s he was hospitalized and then passed away in the middle of the night. In the morning his oldest child, one of my aunts, went to the morgue to identify the body and fill out paperwork. On her way she stopped by my grandmother's to break the news. When she came in my grandmother said, "Oh, it's a sad day. He died just past midnight, I imagine." My grandmother had begun to show some signs of dementia or just basic old age, and so the weird comments weren't too out of character. And, my aunt assumed that the hospital one of her siblings had already called to tell their mother the news. My aunt shook it off and drove to the morgue. When she saw the death certificate she was shocked to see the time of death listed as 12:10 a.m. On her way home she stopped back at my grandmother's and asked her who had called her to tell her the news and asked why. She said that she thought he died just past midnight. My grandmother said he came to see me at 12:30 and we talked for a spell. He wanted to apologize for all he'd done to me and you kids. I think he made his peace and was able to move on, so I'm glad for that. My grandmother then resumed humming and doing a jigsaw puzzle. TLDR, my grandmother knew her ex-husband had died in the approximate time of his death because his ghost visited her in the middle of the night. Edit, went to bed and then awoke to an immense set of comments, many relating similar experiences. I don't have time to reply to all of them. But thanks for the comments. Many are very interesting. About 2 Decembers ago, my fiancé was over my parents' house with me. My parents had gone to a Christmas party and he was helping me set up the tree and decorate the house. All the stuff is in the attic and everyone has said the attic had a strange feeling about it. So we are up in the attic and he mentions he feels like someone was watching us. I say it's probably just the cat as I hand him boxes. We go downstairs and we are unpacking the boxes when we heard a series of huge thuds. I say the cat must have knocked something down, but my fiancé points out that my cat is on the couch asleep. It scared me and I go outside. At that moment, my parents pull up and my dad tells at me for being outside in the cold without a jacket. My fiancé and I tell my parents we heard something and we were officially creeped out. My mom and fiancé decide to go to the room where the attic entrance is. Lo and behold, a box that had been sitting far away from the stairs had fallen down the stairs. Then there was the time my fiancé and I were sleeping at my parents' house. We were getting comfy and slowly dozing off. All of a sudden, right in my ear, I hear a demented, creepy voice say "sweet dreams" and a cackle. I sit up and grab my fiancé. I asked him if he heard that and he said, "Heard what?" I tell him I heard a creepy voice in my ear tell me "sweet dreams." And he was like, "Oh, I thought you meant that creepy laugh you just did." But no one was in the room with us and I didn't laugh. I was running on the trails at the Nathan Hale homestead, 18th century farmhouse and property of a Revolutionary War hero, in CT, which is only about a 10-minute drive from my grandmother's lake house. I could not find a map of the trails anywhere online and there didn't seem to be any signage at the place, just a bunch of random mountain bike trails in the woods. I was only going to run 4 miles, so I estimated that I would run for about 30 minutes, using my watch to keep myself on track. So I ran around the trails for a while and nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. It was about 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and the only sounds were the distant hums of Route 31, birds chirping, and the occasional squirrel or deer that scampered off whenever I came near. The trails seemed to wind around a lot and, if not for my better than average directional skills, humble brag, I could have easily gotten lost. About 20 minutes in, I saw something strange about 50 meters off, a finely polished, light-colored wooden coffin. I was a little weirded out to say the least and waited until I got closer for a better look. I rounded a corner where several old tree stumps blocked my view, only to find that the coffin had disappeared. Where it should have been was a clump of ferns. Odd. I turned around shortly thereafter and made my way back to my car. I was maybe a half mile out when I heard a very distinctive knocking on a nearby tree to the rhythm of Shave and a Haircut. Talk talk tea talk talk, except no 2 bits. I was a little spooked but chalked it up to be a woodpecker or something. However, not 30 seconds later, there it was on a completely different tree up ahead somewhere. Talk talk tea talk talk. I picked up the pace. The trail widened a little and I could see way ahead the entrance to the parking lot where my car was. There it was again, on a tree seemingly right next to me. Talk talk tea talk talk. I truly started freaking out and started to book it back to the lot. I was nearing the opening when time seemed to slow down. All of a sudden it felt like the temperature dropped about 20 degrees, the birds stopped singing, and my simple Timex watch started to malfunction, making all sorts of beeping noises and the numbers glitching on the screen. The beat sounded impossibly loud this time, like it was hacked into every surrounding tree with a hand axe. Talk talk tea talk talk. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me as I anticipated hearing the 2 bits refrain and perhaps worse. I burst into the parking lot and everything went back to normal. The temperature was back in the mid-70s and birds were chirping away. I looked at my watch, only to discover that it had gone completely blank. I stood there and stared at it until it flashed 12 o'clock Monday 1.01, January 1st. My watch had reset itself. It had never done this before. I got into the car and started the engine. The clock on the radio display read 12 o'clock. That couldn't be right, it should have been around 9:30 or 9:45 at the latest. I put her in reverse and backed up to where I could clearly make my way out to the main road. However, as I was about to throw the car into drive as it sat there, I heard a sharp rapping sound on the back window, like someone hitting it with their knuckles. Talk talk. There was no one else in the parking lot when I had finished my run. No cars, no nothing. I didn't dare look back and hightailed it back to my grandmother's house. I have no idea what could have caused this series of events and still cannot explain it to this day. Lived in an old 2-bedroom, 3-story walk-up for a time in my early 20s in Toronto. A few days after moving in, my roommate Mike chides me in the morning for banging on the wall that separated our bedrooms and pacing back and forth across the apartment at night. We just agreed he must have been dreaming or it was sounds from other apartments as I had done no such thing. We agreed that it must have been nothing and left it at that, but this became a regular nightly occurrence. Shortly thereafter I started noticing at certain times in my own bedroom the glowing smell of cheap women's perfume mixed with a damp musty smell. Imagine an old person's clothes left on a damp musty basement floor near a litter box that wasn't being changed often enough and you get the idea. What made it even weirder is that I would be filled with a sudden horrible sense of foreboding a few moments before the smell would begin. Mike flaked out and left only 4 months into our 1-year lease, which meant I was left footing the rent for the entire place until I could find another roommate. I had decided to try and sleep in his bedroom shortly after he moved to see if things would get better. The very first night I slept in his former room I had an incredibly detailed and realistic nightmare of myself standing in the dimly lit bathroom of the apartment and cutting my own face with a large shard of glass while staring into the broken bathroom mirror. It was only broken in the dream. Soon after that I started to hear the loud bangs at night and the flushing of the toilet in the bathroom. Several times the hot water in the bathtub turned on full blast in the middle of the night. One of the freakier things that happened not too long before I moved is the time I was woken up by the TV blaring Poltergeist on City TV at about 2 in the morning. At the time the channel would always play movies late at night, but the fact that the one time my analog TV, turn a knob to change the channel or the volume, pull a knob to turn it on, turned on by itself at full blast was the time a movie like Poltergeist was playing.